MDC-Alliance leader Nelson Chamisa on Tuesday declared that he is ready to assume power and steer Zimbabwe on a recovery path. This despite critics in the Southern African nation questioning his maturity to lead. Advocate Chamisa assumed the opposition's top post in 2018 following the death of the founding leader and unionist Morgan Tsvangirai. He joins us live now to talk more on this. Good evening to you, and thank you so much for your time this evening. Let's then begin with the significance of a day like today as you were marking your anniversary in Pretoria.
Well, I must say that in Pretoria, which is in South Africa, they are just indicating what we have already observed and considered ourselves in Zimbabwe. On the 11th of September, we celebrated 22 years of existence, which is 22 years of our struggle against dictatorship in Zimbabwe. And I must say that this is a significant milestone in terms of the journey that we have so far traversed. So what we are seeing in South Africa is just the continuation of those celebrations.
I wonder then, what are your reflections 12 years later? How would you say you have fared as the opposition?
Well, 22 years later, we've done so much. I can tell you that we've made significant gains in terms of democratic consolidation, in terms of guarding zones of autonomy, in terms of making sure that we present a credible alternative, but also more importantly, in terms of making sure that we do not surrender in terms of this authoritarian attack. You are aware that the MDC has been under incessant attacks. We have also received these challenges around disputed elections since the time when Mr. Tsvangirai was there, when he was contesting against Mr. Mugabe. We have always had these challenges. And of course, we have managed to internationalize and globalize the struggle for democracy, for freedom, for change in Zimbabwe. So we are very happy with the milestone that we have made. We have also made significant gains in the various local authorities where we have been given the mandate to govern. Of course, of late, we have had challenges with ZANU-PF invading those spaces by trying to impose their own will by manipulating local authorities.
Pardon me, I said, in fact, 12 years instead of 22 years in my previous question. But one of the things that, we've seen 22 years later, Mr. Chamisa, is the apparent, tensions that also then, became evident within the opposition in Zimbabwe. When you look back then at some of these squabbles, how would you say these tensions have also derailed what then became your vision as the MDC to be able to govern the people of Zimbabwe at some point?
Well, I must say that there is no trajectory to freedom that is without its own dynamics and internal contradictions. This happens with all mass movements. We have had our own fair, share of those challenges. But the good thing is that we've remained standing. We have learned out of these challenges. These are tectonic plates within the political movement that have been moving. They have not shaken us. They've actually strengthened us. And I can tell you that as an institution, we are stronger. I can tell you that as a cause, we're even finer and refined in terms of what we fight for. And we are clear about the struggle and the goal that we have. Those who have fallen by the wayside is because they were not part of this distilled process to make sure that there's change in this country. So yes, we've learned our lessons, and those lessons are very valuable. We have now learned that there is now need for us to converge all democratic voices. This is why this year we've been focusing on the convergence of citizens for change. And that convergence is taking shape. We are happy that forces are aligning. The forces for change are aligning as we also see the decomposition and decay of those forces of continuity, particularly is led by Mr. Mnangagwa.
As we speak tonight, there's an article on the Africa report which was published on the 6th of August. And one of the things that they're saying is that the MDC-Alliance, in fact, is really just making it easy for the ZANU-PF to do what it needs to do in Parliament, and you are leaving them plain sailing, basically. And one of the things that they say that, you are found wanting on is to challenge the ZANU-PF in Parliament, and they quote, the amendment that raised the retirement age of the Constitutional and Supreme Court judges, and they say that this was an amendment to the Constitution that was easily approved, which signals the constraints that you as a party are now facing, and they say that yours is a failed motion. What do you say to that?
Well, I must say that let us get facts so that we know what we're talking about. The challenges we are having, particularly in terms of the composition of parliament, are as a result of the interference by Mr. Mnangagwa and ZANU-PF by recalling MDC-Alliance MP so that they manufacture and also criminally attain a two-thirds majority in parliament. So our ability to block the passage of certain of the obnoxious pieces of legislation is on account of the tomfoolery and shenanigans we have seen being played by Mr. Mnangagwa. How has he done this? They've recalled MDC-Alliance MPs. So far, we have over 40 members of parliament who have been recalled from parliament. We've also had councillors, over 90 of them, who have been recalled from local authorities. Why have they been recalled? There's a manufactured judgment which says that the MDC-Alliance is not the MDC-Alliance, when in fact, it's a fact that we contested in the election as MDC-Alliance. But they've now tried to confuse and conflate the MDC-T and the MDC-Alliance. So almost playing divide and rule. Mr. Mnangagwa trying to create his own opposition that he is comfortable with, so that he has a controlled and a captured opposition. But we have refused to accept that. We have seen, of course, that parliament is now buffeted by illegitimacy, which illegitimacy has affected actually the composition of members of parliament and the parliament itself.
I wonder, what do you say then to some of those that are criticizing you, saying you are too young to lead, you're not mature enough, given some of what they call your antics, and they say based on some of the speeches you may not be mature enough to lead. But I've seen you also talk about how young people need to take over the reins. But what do you say then to this continued criticism that you're not yet mature enough to take office?
Well, this criticism is coming from people who are too old to govern and to lead. And because they are too old, they want to use ageism as a way of discrediting young people. But if you look at people like Mr. Mnangagwa, you look at his deputy, Mr. Chwenga, you can name them. The list goes on and on. Even Mr. Mugabe himself, when he assumed the reins of power in 1980, at the attainment of our independence, they were all young. Some were actually in their 20s, some in their 30s. Mr. Mnangagwa, of course, in the 30s. Maybe Mr. Mugabe was in the early 50s. So this whole argument of trying to confuse age and maturity is completely misconceived and misbegotten. But it's coming from those who are scared of the impact that we have made on the market, political market. We have the support of the people of Zimbabwe. We defeated them in the election in 2018. They had to play their sort of, games and antics. But I can tell you that we will defeat them again in any election. And that's why they are scared of an election. That's why they've avoided by-elections. That's why they are trying to even attempt to postpone an election, because they know that in Zimbabwe, on the land, in the sea, on the mountains, in the street, wherever, in communities, we will defeat them in an election. And it's going to be a landslide. It's going to be a big margin. This is why they are now resorting to all these sort of tricks. But we are not shaken.
As a final question, Mr. Chamisa, very briefly, one of the things that we've seen in Zimbabwe in recent months has been the unhappiness by some unions who are even taking government to court over the mandatory vaccination, saying that for them this is something they do not agree with. What then would be the position of the MDC-Alliance on this issue?
Well, we have always emphasized that there's no need for us to command people in everything. In Zimbabwe, we have a disaster. There's command agriculture. There's command transport. They force people to use the ZUPCO for public transport. There's command education. There's command foreign currency through their controlled foreign currency or foreign exchange system with the Reserve Bank. Now we are seeing this command vaccination, command health. You cannot lead a country through force, through coercive methods. Gone are the days when force and cohesion would be instruments of governing. They are antiquated and outdated. What we want going forward is voluntary vaccination. Let people be educated on the need and necessity of a vaccination. But to force people is unacceptable. We don't believe in a situation where the government becomes a prefect. To lead is not to be prefecting or superintending over people's affairs. Health is a matter of choice, and we must allow people the freedom to make the definite choice that they have to make, of course, as we seek to achieve and attain that herd immunity.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Chamisa, for your time this evening. That was Advocate Nelson Chamisa, the leader of the MDC-Alliance.